A Simplex converted to a Great Western Railway Prairie Tank Part 87. Removing the masking tape from the chimney top cap, bolting the smokebox to the smokebox saddle and painting the front part that covers the oil tank. The job starts by removing the masking tape that covers the top cap of the chimney, which I copper plated. And I was quite pleased to see that when I removed the masking tape it didn't remove any of the copper plate. I can see some paint around the inside edge, but that's just my bad masking. I'm quite pleased with the paint finish on the smokebox and the chimney. Nothing's been done to this paint, it's just as it left the rattle can. Time now to do a job that I've not really been looking forward to, bolting the smokebox to the Smokebox saddle, using 8BA nuts and bolts from my box of 8BA nuts and bolts. It could be worse, there could be 10BA bolts. It's still fiddly with the 8BA size, they're very small. In this clip you can see why I don't work on 3.5 inch gauge engines. My large hand only just fits into the smokebox in 5 inch gauge. This was a really fiddly job, especially getting the small nuts to engage on the bolts inside the smokebox. First of all, I fitted a bolt and a nut in each of the corners, one at each side. When I first drilled the smokebox using the saddle as a template, I did remember that there was a bit of a discrepancy on the front right-hand side one. The distance between the holes is quite good until you get to the first one. Anticipating this, I bought a special tool just to drill this hole. After this last nut and bolt, I need to tackle the front one. And this is what I bought. A really useful Proxxon mains-powered right-angle drill. This allowed me to easily drill through the smokebox and through the saddle, and it ended up that the nut and bolt in this front hole wasn't exactly in the right position, but near enough for rock and roll. You have to remember that parts of this engine are not very well made and other parts are, and if you don't believe me, please watch some of the earlier episodes. Once again, one of the cheap Blackgate's laser-cut spanners is the answer to holding the bolts while I screw the nuts on from inside using a nut spinner. What was I saying about the workmanship on this engine? Well, the smokebox is not a perfect fit on the saddle. The saddle was originally made to accommodate a smokebox that was made from copper and entirely different to this brass one. In actual fact, this ended up being a bonus because once I tightened all the bolts on the saddle, I detected that the chimney wasn't 100% vertical. So I slackened off the bolts on this side and tightened the ones at the other side, which pulled the chimney into perfect alignment. Like a lot of model engineering jobs, this did take a lot longer than I planned. This is on the other side, and I just continued fitting a bolt and a nut and a bolt and a nut until I'd got them all fitted and tightened up. And after what seemed to be quite a long time, the last bolt and the last nut were fitted in place. All I need to do now is tighten them up using a nut spinner on the inside and the Blackgate spanner on the outside. Now it looks like this. The chimney is sat quite vertical and it should be fine. The next part of the job is fitting the smokebox door. Here it is. And in this clip, even though you can only see the back of my hand, I'm fitting the pin that holds the door to the hinges. I made this pin quite a snug fit in the holes, and now it's been painted, it's an even more snug fit. At least it's not going to work loose and fall out. All I need to do now is tap it in place, and I did this by using a small hammer. I also did this very gently because I didn't want to hit the paintwork. I had thought about using a long piece of brass bar, but in the end I thought no, I'll use the hammer. I do like to live life on the edge. That's another job done. The smokebox door fits perfectly flat against the front of the smokebox. A smokebox door has to be an airtight fit on the smokebox, and that's where this mechanical contrivance, which is a smokebox dart and its operating levers, comes in. A simple and obvious yet clever solution. The last time I fitted the smokebox door handle, at the time I was fitting the hinges to the smokebox, a viewer wrote in to tell me that I'd fitted it the wrong way round, and I can't remember what the right way round is. It doesn't really matter as long as I know which is the right way. This locking handle arrangement and the smokebox dart is just a quarter-turn latch. That's the smokebox fitted. It's now time to turn my attention to the front part that covers the oil tank. I've already rubbed down this part when I removed the paint, but now I'm rubbing it down again using some Scotch-Brite. And now in the outer part of the workshop, it's painting time. I'm using this really good etching primer that I buy from a company called Autopaint Northern. It's not really designed for brass, but it sticks very well to it. It's worth noting that when you use etching primer, you don't need a thick coat. In this clip, I'm going to put too much on. So why am I doing that, you may be asking? Well, I do have a bit of a problem when I'm spray painting. I quite enjoy it, and I find it very difficult to stop doing it. I really do need to get out more, and now that the COVID-19 lockdown in England is easing a bit, I probably will. I will be rubbing down this etching primer, and after I've done that, I'm going to fill some of the gaps around the fancy bit in the middle. This etching primer is called High Build Etching Primer, and yes, it does seem to be different to the other stuff that I used. But at least with a good thick coat on there, it'll be something to rub down without going through to the brass underneath. Here's the final shot in this sequence, watching the paint dry. Back now into the inner part of the workshop, here are some general views of the engine and the progress so far. The final part of the job in this particular episode is touching in the paintwork on the sides of the Smokebox Saddle, including the bolts of course. The position of the front bolt on the right hand side looked very conspicuous before I painted it, but once I painted it, it looked okay. When I was a kid, I once made a plastic model of Bismarck, and the only paint I had was some house paint that was purple, so I used that in copious amounts, and you can imagine what a purple model of a Bismarck looked like. When I showed it to my uncle, he raised one eyebrow and said, "You've painted out all the detail, you've buried it under a thick layer of paint." And this is one of the things from childhood that really stuck, so whenever I'm painting things, this is always at the back of my mind. In some circumstances, when a bolt is in the wrong place, like on this Smokebox Saddle, it's a good idea to paint out some of the detail. But it's a fine line between painting out the detail and making a thorough mess. Here are some clips of the paint on the Smokebox Saddle drying. I think the standard of the Smokebox fits the standard of the rest of the build, so I'm quite pleased with it. I think the next job is going to be painting the boiler, but first of all I need to get some precision paint transferred into aerosols, and that will mean a trip over to Blackgates Engineering and then to Autopaint Northern. But for now, that's it, and this concludes episode 87. Stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.